Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're tackling a topic that often feels incredibly tangled and, frankly, pretty overwhelming.
Mm.
The geopolitics of the Middle East.
Yeah, it's definitely complex.
You sent us some absolutely fascinating material, and our mission for this deep dive is clear.
Yep.
We're going to try and cut through some of the noise, challenge some uh, deeply held assumptions, maybe,
Mm.
and really unearth the drivers behind the region's alliances and conflicts.
Mm-hmm.
What we're hoping to uncover is why things are often far less about what they seem on the surface.
Exactly. And, the common narrative, the one you often hear, is that the sectarian divisions, Sunni versus Shia, that's the primary lens, right, for understanding almost every conflict there.
Right, that's the usual story.
But what our source material reveals is, well, a compelling counter-narrative. It shows how strategic interests, shared rivalries, and just pure political pragmatism frequently override religious or ideological differences.
So, interest trumping ideology.
Pretty much. And what's truly fascinating, I think, is how often the real reasons are hidden behind these simpler, maybe more convenient, but ultimately misleading explanations.
Okay, let's unpack this then. We've got some examples from the material that might genuinely surprise you. First up, let's look at the alliance between Azerbaijan and Turkey.
Okay.
Now, if you're thinking purely along sectarian lines, you might expect these two countries to be, well, at odds, right?
Yeah, naturally.
Azerbaijan is Shia majority, Turkey is Sunni majority. Yet, they're described as firm allies.
Yeah.
So, what's actually driving that?
That's a fantastic starting point because it immediately challenges that conventional wisdom. What the source highlights is that this alliance, despite the sectarian difference, is incredibly strong.
Right.
And the reason given, both countries share a deep-seated historical animosity towards Armenian and Russian people.
Ah, okay. Shared history, shared grievances.
Exactly. And it's not just historical stuff. The material points out that even ideological differences, like, Azerbaijan's President Ilham Aliyev being a staunch secularist.
Meaning keeping religion and state very separate.
Right. Versus Turkish President Erdogan and his party, who are often seen as more Islamist, wanting governance aligned with Islamic principles. Even those big differences don't break the alliance.
So it really comes down to common interest in a shared rival then.
That's the argument. The source even throws out a hypothetical. What if Azerbaijanis revolted and Turkey supported Aliyev, leading to many Shia deaths?
Okay.
The source argues, we wouldn't say Turkey is killing Shias. We'd say Turkey is supporting its strategic ally, Ilham Aliyev, in killing his opponents.
Oh, okay. That really does set the stage. It's less about the religious identity of the people and far more about the political identity of the ally
Yes.
and the shared strategic goals. And this pattern isn't isolated, you said.
Not at all. Our sources bring up another powerful example, this one involving Bahrain and Pakistan.
Okay. Bahrain and Pakistan. Let's hear it.
Well, it's a striking parallel, really. The material you provided shows that Pakistan has effectively taken on the responsibility of protecting Bahrain's government.
Protecting the government. Okay.
And here's where it gets really illustrative. Bahrain is a Shia majority country, population-wise.
Right.
But it's ruled by a Sunni royal family. And Pakistan, a Sunni majority nation, is a key ally of this Sunni royal family. They even recruit Pakistani youth into Bahrain's army.
Okay, so you have Pakistani soldiers potentially policing a Shia population under a Sunni monarchy, which is their ally.
Precisely. So if we follow the source's logic again, imagine if Bahraini citizens, mostly Shia, revolted,
Uh-huh.
and Pakistani forces stepped in to support the royal family and, yes, fired on those Bahraini people. The source argues very clearly, Pakistani soldiers wouldn't be seen as killing Shias,
They'd be seen as.
killing the enemies of the Bahrain royal family, who is, of course, an ally of Pakistan's army.
Hmm.
It's about who you're aligned with strategically, not their sect.
It consistently points back to state interests, strategic alignment dictating actions, not necessarily sectarian solidarity.
Exactly. And this logic becomes even more compelling when we look at situations where alliances have shifted, sometimes dramatically over time,
Yeah.
based purely on evolving strategic needs.
Right, not fixed forever.
Definitely not. And the history of Yemen offers a really powerful illustration of this.
Yemen. Yeah, okay, this sounds complex already. It was divided for decades, wasn't it?
It was. And what the source reveals here is quite counterintuitive based on the simple sectarian narrative.
How so?
Okay, so North Yemen, which had a Zaidi Shia majority that's a distinct branch of Shia Islam, historically powerful there,
Got it.
they were actually in the camp of the U.S. and Saudi Arabia.
Wait, the Shia North with the U.S. and Sunni Saudi Arabia?
Yep. Meanwhile, Sunni-majority South Yemen was allied with Gamal Abdel Nasser's Egypt and Russia.
Okay, that's already messing with the simple narrative.
And get this. Saudi Arabia, the major Sunni power, actively supported those Zaydi Shias in the north against the communist Sunni government in the south.
So Saudi Arabia supported Shias against Sunnis.
In that specific context, yes. It completely flips the script on what many might assume based just on sect.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So what happened when Yemen united?
Well, the source makes it clear. When Yemen united, the dictator backed by Saudi Arabia, Abdullah Saleh, was also a Zaydi Shia. Politically secular, though.
Another Zaydi Shia, but backed by the Saudis.
Right. Then, years later, an Iran-backed Islamist resistance movement, also Zaydi, rose up and eventually took over half of Yemen, the Houthis.
Okay, so Zaydis on both sides at different times, backed by opposing regional powers.
Exactly. And Saudi Arabia responded to the rise of the Iran-backed Houthis by attacking Yemen, leading to intense bombing. And the source notes the majority killed in this bombing were Shia.
Right, because the areas being bombed were largely Zaydi Shia areas controlled by the Houthis.
Correct. So the question the source then poses is crucial. Was Saudi Arabia killing Shias?
And based on the earlier logic, the answer would be no.
That's what the material argues. A firm no. It highlights that Saudi Arabia had previously good relations with Yemeni Shias, even supporting them against Sunnis, as we saw.
Right.
The argument is that Saudi Arabia was not killing Shias per se, but rather killing groups supported by its opponent, Iran.
So again, it's about the opponent Iran, not the sect of the people caught in the middle.
Precisely. The identity of the enemy, the competitor, becomes the paramount factor. And this principle, the source suggests, also plays out dramatically if we look at the Iran-Iraq war.
Okay, let's shift to that. Iraq, also Shia majority, right? Especially the southern regions near Iran.
Absolutely. And the source highlights Iraq during Saddam Hussein's rule. Now, Saddam himself came from a Sunni family, but ideologically, he was a staunch secularist Ba'athist.
Okay.
During the long, brutal Iran-Iraq war, Iran bombed Iraq. And what's striking is that not only were Iraqi Shias often killed as, collateral damage in these Iranian bombings.
Which you'd expect in war, tragically.
Yes, but also countless Iraqi Shias were forcibly or voluntarily recruited into Saddam's army. They became part of the Iraqi military machine that Iran was fighting.
So they were Iranian targets because they were soldiers in Saddam's army, regardless of being Shia themselves.
Exactly. So the source asks again, was Iran killing Shias then?
And the answer, following the pattern,
is no. According to the source's analysis, Iran was killing the army of its enemy, Saddam Hussein. It's a brutal calculus, but the reasoning presented is purely strategic, based on state rivalry.
It really forces you to look past the sectarian label.
Yeah.
Which leads to the question you raised earlier, why do we so often default to that sectarian narrative?
Yeah.
Especially in really complex, devastating conflicts like Syria. The evidence seems to suggest these deeper strategic roots.
That's the core question, isn't it? And this is where the source really zeroes in. Syria, or Sham, as it's often called historically, it's a Sunni-majority country.
Right.
But it's been ruled for decades by the al-Assad family, who are Alawite, that's a minority faith, often considered an offshoot of Shia Islam, but distinct. And their Ba'ath Party is known for its hardline secular political views.
Okay, so a secular Alawite minority ruling a Sunni majority. Already complex.
Very. Now, contract that with Iran. After its 1979 revolution, it became a strictly religious government, a theocracy. Its specific sect is Twelver Usuli Shi'ism. That's not the same as the Alawite faith.
So different sects, different approaches to governance, one secular, one theocratic. What's the connection then?
Well, despite these vast differences, the material explains that the crucial common ground between the Syrian and Iranian governments was their shared enmity with Israel.
Okay. The enemy of my enemy.
Pretty much. For Iran, this opposition to Israel was driven by its post-revolution Islamism. For Syria's Ba'ath Party, it was rooted in Arab nationalism. The source reminds us, back in the 1973 war, Arab countries fought Israel together. But afterwards, Egypt and Jordan made peace, recognized Israel, got territories back. Syria, however, refused. It wouldn't reclaim the Golan Heights under those terms, sticking firmly to its anti-Israel stance.
And that decision had consequences for its alliances.
Big time. Having lost those key Arab allies like Jordan and Egypt, Iran and Syria formed what the source explicitly calls a strategic alliance. One based not on sect, not on ideology, but purely out of necessity.
Realpolitik in action, survival strategy.
Precisely. And this leads to the crux of the source's argument on Syria. It highlights a really powerful contrast.
Okay.
Think about when Syria, under Hafez al-Assad, Bashar's father, also an Alawite, when he was allied with the Sunni monarchies of Jordan and Saudi Arabia.
Right, before the big shift.
Even then, Assad was a dictator. He killed opposition members, and in a Sunni-majority country, naturally, most of those opponents were Sunnis.
Sure, that makes sense.
But, as the source points out very sharply, no one said at that time that Saudi Arabia, Jordan, or Egypt were supporting an Alawite or Shia and killing Sunnis in Syria.
That's a really interesting observation. It wasn't framed that way back then.
It wasn't. But, the source argues, as soon as Syria became an ally of Iran, the sectarian card immediately came out.
So the framing changed when the strategic alliance shifted towards Iran.
That's the claim. The author makes a very strong statement here, calling talk like Iran killed Sunnis in Syria either utterly foolish or extreme treachery.
Strong words. What's the clarification offered?
It's a bold statement, yeah, but it highlights the source's central point. The clarification is Iran did not kill Sunnis because they were Sunnis. Rather, Iran supported its strategic ally Bashar al-Assad in a horrific civil war.
Okay. Supporting the regime, its ally.
Yes, and the source acknowledges that both sides in that war were extremely brutal. And Assad, being the one in power, the government had more scope to be brutal, and he was.
It doesn't excuse the brutality, then.
Not at all. The material is clear. Whether Iran's involvement was morally right or wrong, that's a separate debate. But the issue, the source insists, should be presented correctly in terms of strategic motivations, not just simple sectarianism.
So, tying this together, what does it all mean when we think about more recent events like the Arab Spring? How does this lens apply?
Well, the source actually shares a very personal reflection on that. The author talks about their initial feelings during the Arab Spring, feeling filled with enthusiasm and hope that dictatorships would fall, including Syria's.
A lot of people felt that way initially.
Absolutely. The author mentions their own ideological commitment at the time to both Islam and democracy, and they initially saw Iran supporting the Arab Spring elsewhere as an Islamic awakening, which fit their view. But Iran's continued support for the dictator Assad in Syria, the author says they did not like at all. It seemed like blatant hypocrisy.
Supporting uprisings in one place, but the dictator in another? Yeah, I could see that seeming contradictory.
It's a really crucial point of introspection in the material, showing how even deeply held beliefs can be, well, challenged by events. Because then, as the Arab Spring tragically unfolded into what the source calls the Arab Winter...
Yeah, things turned much darker.
Exactly. A deeper understanding started to emerge for the author. They note how revolutions were hijacked. Libya, for instance, descended into chaos and civil war even without Iran's interference.
True.
And the overthrow of Mohamed Morsi's government in Egypt, who the source refers to as Martyr Morsi, that particularly shaped this reevaluation.
Okay, so seeing these outcomes shifted the perspective.
It seems so. The author explains this helped them grasp why Iran, despite being an Islamic republic, would support a secular dictator like Assad in Syria. The reason, they concluded, was certainly not Shi'ism.
So what was it in this revised view?
It was the insight, as the author puts it, that if the government in Syria fell, it wouldn't necessarily lead to a stable democracy friendly to Iran's interests. Instead, it might open the doors for Israel, and Iran would lose an absolutely key strategic ally against Israel.
Ah, back to the Israel calculus.
Yes. The core belief articulated here is that, for Iran's leadership, Israel is the real and fundamental problem of the Middle East. Therefore, no risk could be taken in this regard. Supporting Assad, however flawed, was seen as preventing a worse outcome strategically.
A kind of lesser of two evils calculation from their perspective.
That seems to be the interpretation. And the author's understanding solidified further, they write, when the real representative leadership of the Syrian people, including groups like the Muslim Brotherhood, were sidelined in the opposition, and strange groups, presumably more radical factions, came to the forefront.
So the nature of the opposition also played into Iran's strategic thinking, according to this source.
It appears so. It's a really powerful internal journey described there, reflecting the sheer complexity of these geopolitical decisions.
Wow. What a journey through these complex alliances and shifting narratives. This deep dive really makes you pause and, well, reconsider the conventional wisdom, doesn't it?
It really does.
It seems the deeper you look into the Middle East, the more you realize that the lines aren't just blurry, they're often redrawn completely by power dynamics and cold, hard national interests.
Precisely. And the source leaves us with a final, quite provocative thought.
Hmm.
It suggests that after observing recent events, particularly mentioning the actions of Julani, leader of HTS in Syria and Israel's incursions into Lebanon, the author believes most people's eyes, except for the sectarianists, must have opened.
Suggesting recent events further prove the strategic point over the sectarian one.
That seems to be the implication. It kind of throws a question back at us, doesn't it? Are
Yeah.
we, as observers, still holding on to maybe outdated frameworks? Or are we truly seeing the geopolitical landscape for what it is, a realm where pragmatism and fundamental strategic interests often, maybe even usually, dictate who stands with whom? What really stands out to you from all this?